My name is Nicolas, and this is John, and we're going to talk to you today about ConstraintLayout, a new layout for Android.
What's layout all about? Basically, you need to position widgets on the screen based on something that a UI designer might have given you, for example. So you have to lay them out in some particular fashion on a screen. But what happens if you have another screen that you have to lay out? If they're fixed position, on the new screen, it's not going to look right. Things are too far away from the edges, things like that. Now, how many screens would you actually have to do if you had to do every screen out there? 5,400 is a rough number. That's 90 common screen sizes, 30 languages, landscape, portrait, many, many devices, and it'll take you a really long time. That's why from the very beginning, Android had layouts. They're able to adjust sizes and position things dynamically for you. There are a bunch of different layouts we can talk about. And you can divide them up into two basic categories: simple layouts and complex layouts. The classic simple layout is linear layout. Essentially, you put your widgets inside of it, and you have a row or a column of buttons or widgets. Now, you can build very complex layouts with just using linear layout by doing deep nesting. But deep nesting has its performance problems. On the other hand, if you use a complex layout, like relative layout or grid layout, it'll create shallow hierarchies. But without a good GUI builder to use them, it's actually very difficult to keep them stable. We need something new to help us with that stuff. That's why.
And so that's why we are now presenting you ConstraintLayout. So it's available on the new Android Studio 2.2 preview in the Canary build. And basically, it's a small unbundled library. It's actually backward compatible back to Gingerbread, to API 11.9. That means nearly everything out there. And it's designed to reduce deep hierarchies, and it's designed from the very beginning to work within Studio. And if you have started to look a little bit at ConstraintLayout already, it might look a little bit like relative layout, right? You set relations between different widgets, and that seems pretty similar to what ConstraintLayout does. Well, sure, but actually, ConstraintLayout does what relative layout does, but more. And as it is more expressive, you should be able to reduce nesting. And as John said, nesting in general would not be a great thing for your performances. It's also packaged as an unbundled library, which means that not only can you use it from day one, but we will also be able to regularly iterate on it and push new versions and add new features, and you'll be able to get them instantly. It's also extensible in its design, which you don't care too much about, apart that from us, that allows us to easily add new features. And finally, it comes with a great UI builder. As I said, that was really created as the same team, actually. The same team worked on both the constraint layout and the UI builder, and we really tried to make a UI builder that is flexible and easy to use, and really try to help you. So when we started to think about creating a new layout system, because we're not super happy with the current design, we just started with something very generic. OK, we need an equation solver. And on top of that, we had equations. But the problem with that is with the equations, and we could have stopped there, right? We could have said, oh, you have equation, that's great. Just set your equation, put your layout, and that's it. But the issue with that is it's actually very easy, we found out, to create systems that are not only complex, may not perform really well, and also can even be unpredictable in the way they react. So that's why we built on top of the equation system a very simple but pretty expressive system of constraints. And that allows us to control all the type of constraints and the type of equation that runs and ensure better performances. On top of that, we then build the UI builder plus inference tools to create the constraint for you, and a bunch of other tools that we will demo later. So, very quick overview of the constraint model. If you want to create a connection, you just drag from an anchor to a target. And the other thing you can do is if you simply drag that widget, you can actually specify a margin. And that's all a connection is. It's saying, take one side, move it to a target, and possibly keep a specific gap. And you can apply those connections on, of course, top, bottom, left, right, or start and end for right to left languages. We also support baseline. And at first glance, that's it. The other thing that is different and particularly relative to relative layout is what happens if you actually set a connection on both ends, both on the left and on the right. And if you have a widget that actually is fixed size, that sounds impossible, right? I mean, the left side cannot be matching its constraint at the same time as the right side match the constraint if the widget does not resize. So what we do in that case is that we just center it. And because it's centered and we can tweak the result, we let you decide how much bias you want toward one side or the other. And you can also do that directly into the UI builder, just drag the element or use the inspector. Another option that we provide is, well, what if you want to resize a widget? And in that case, think about it like match parent. And actually, we do not support match parent. But what we do support, it's something that's more like match constraint. And what that will do is resize the widget so that the constraint that you define the size of the widget. Another important aspect that is often, that often comes when you try to do complex behavior in your UI is what happens when you want the widget to be gone. I mean, the first case is, OK, the widget is invisible. If you do that, nothing changes. That's easy. It's just not drawn on screen. But for gone, what we do is we collapse the widget that you marked as gone as a single point. And we discard its margins. So it completely disappears, but the actual hierarchy of constraint still applies. And so that allows you to have a lot more reactive user interface behaviors. All right, some of you might have wondered about what are the attributes. And yes, we did build a great UI builder. And we do think that that UI builder will really help you create those UIs and really make your life easy. But if you do want to use the XML or the programming or do the UI programmatically, you can still do it. It's a normal view group. You still have access to everything. So if you look at those attributes, it sounds like, wow, there is a lot. But actually, not so much. If you look at those ones are the usual ones. Just defining the width, the size, the text size, and stuff like that. Nothing to do with us, really. Then you got a bunch of attributes, and so we can discard those. Then we got a bunch of attributes that are actually, as the prefix indicates, for the tool. It's just for Android Studio. If you do things programmatically, you don't care about that at all. And in fact, when you push to a device, those attributes get stripped out. So really, the one we care about are those four in the middle. And really, on those four in the middle, the margin start and top, you probably know them already. So we only have two more attributes to just say you have a constraint on the left and a constraint on the top. So it's actually pretty tractable. That said, we really think that the UI builder is great. And in fact, if you have issues with the UI builder, if it doesn't work for your workflow, tell us. We really want to hear from you because we really want to make your life easy. All right, let's talk about the layout editor itself. So it's two-way editing, right? We can edit the XML and see the results directly live, or vice versa. You can, edit the UI, and that will directly translate to the XML. You can have both views at the same time, or you can stay in the design mode. It's directly integrated into Studio. And we really try to make it so that there is an immediate feedback. And so it's really easy to use. Things get predictable, and you're not surprised, like you might have been in the past with relative layout, with whatever the layout decides, wherever it decides to put the widgets. And it's in active development. We just released it in 2.2 preview. It's in alpha. We definitely welcome bug reports. All right. Do you want to talk about that?
OK, one of the nice things that the new layout editor has is the inspector. This gives you an iconified view of a single widget that is you've selected. The arrows on the left and right, the lines on the left and right, and up and down show you which sides have been constrained. The numbers show you the margins that have been set, and you can actually just move your mouse over them and edit the margins directly. The sliders allow you to adjust bias if you're connected on both sides, so you have a bias. The little arrows inside show whether you're wrap content or spread or fixed width. OK, let's go to the demo now and on the laptop.
All right, so you can see that's Studio, right? And if you have played with it already, that should be familiar. And you can see here, this just shows the constraint layout. And I can switch to the design mode. And we have those two modes. We have the design mode where it shows what things look like on the device. And you have the blueprint mode. And you can also have both of them at the same time if you prefer. So why did we do the blueprint mode? Well, simply because sometimes what you show in terms of layout doesn't actually appear in the design surface. Like, for example, if you look at a button, the button shows smaller than what its actual bounds are. So the blueprint mode, think about it as it's an X-ray of your current layout and only show you the information that pertains to the layout. So with constraint layout, you can just go and drag wherever you want. And you do have some guidelines to help you position elements. We follow the material design guideline, for instance. And it's very easy to use. You can, without doing any constraints so far, you can still move it wherever you want. And it's really good when you are simply playing around or trying to design your UI, testing to see how things really fit. So if you create a connection, we just animate directly. And you can see that if I don't create a connection, we still show you what will happen if you release and create the connection. And that actually works with the entire system. So if I drag a button, and I attach this button here, and I kill this connection, everything moves together. So, and you can see here it's only constrained horizontally, so vertically nothing changes. And I can create a connection manually like that. You can destroy all the connection by clicking this, and just align your things and create those connections. There are two different modes to create connections. One is this manual one, and I think it's very important because we want you to be able to easily tweak the resulting UI. But there is another one that's a little bit more easy to use in some cases, which is the auto alignment. And if we go on auto alignment, let me go back on that. So auto alignment works with this icon here, this little U-shaped magnet. And what happens now, if that is on, is that if I put my widget on a guideline, it will create those connections. And you can see that there's this small animation. As long as the animation is not finished, I can still move things around. But if I let it go, then the widget will actually be constrained. So if I actually resize, oops, there's a bug. If I resize that, yeah, repaint bug, but you can see that the constraints are applied. And I think you will talk about the tools now.
Well, one more piece of auto alignment that you might have forgotten. One of the nice things about auto alignment is that when you put an object like this, the fact that you see the guidelines allows it to connect. So as long as you can see the guidelines, you'll be able to let it go, and it'll connect for you. So it can be a quick way, especially for very simple UIs to be built. The next thing I wanted to show you is what we call our tools. So because we are so much a rich UI layout type environment, we wanted to add tools that were a lot like the stuff that you would see in PowerPoint or any of the Visio, any of the graphical tools. So at the top, you'll see a collection of widgets. And they work in sort of standard ways where let me undo the, where they would align left, right, middle, that kind of thing. There's a special mode. If you have the magnet turned on, when you issue those, it'll actually create constraints for you. So if you care about having the constraints very specifically left aligned, you can use this to sort of tell you how would that happen.
And in fact, it's kind of how we want the tool to be used. We want it to be used in a very flexible way. Some people might just, as they go along, just create the constraints. Or some people might just prefer to lay out the widget, look, oh yeah, they're in a nice place, and then build the constraints. It's really up to you.
So it helps in a lot of situations like this, where you're just aligning things, putting things together like this, setting up, and you can see fairly quickly I can come up with a reasonable amount of alignment and packing of things in ways that we'd like to use it. OK, for the next piece, I want to go to the next one. For the next piece, I wanted to talk to you about inference. Now, inference is it's a fairly complicated system.
1 second.
OK. You're scaring me there. What we're doing, it's just one button, the little light bulb button. Don't press it yet. What we do when you press that button, we calculate the probability of all possible connections. And then we walk through a series of heuristically defined algorithms which will make connections for you. By the end of it, all things will be properly constrained. There are a couple of things, it's a bit magical, but there are a couple of things to remember about it. 3 things to remember. It'll never really move a widget on you. It'll apply constraints wherever you've left your widgets beforehand. So it's not going to suddenly push a widget off the screen or something like that. It will do some small changes whenever there is trying to do an alignment of things, but that's OK. By the end of the pass, all of the things are guaranteed to be constrained. If you have a constraint beforehand, it will honor those constraints. So it will never destroy an existing constraint that you've created. So you can create constraints and then let it finish the job for you. And in fact, in the demos you saw, a lot of them were some manually created constraints. Sometimes it will do auto-constraint. Go ahead, Nicholas. Press the button. Let's see what happens. So there you see it. It made a bunch of constraints. It aligned everything. Now resize the widget. Resize the screen. So that was done just by drawing out the widgets in the right space, and it can align them. If you didn't like a particular constraint it made, you could change it yourself, or you could add a new constraint, add one.
Yeah, so for example, I can still go and just destroy those connections and say, actually, I really wanted that one to be connected on the top. And actually, here you can see that we have a couple of mods to create those connections. So by default, it creates, with the margin you indicate in the toolbar on top. But if I press Control, it actually will create a margin with the current distance. And sometimes that's kind of nice, because if you just want to create the constraint, but you are actually happy with the current way the widgets are positioned, that's a time saver.
So another thing you can do is, if you've already laid out and you added a bunch of constraints and stuff, but you needed one more piece of UI on the system, add some new piece of UI in there. Now,
that's OK.
Now you can just press the button again.
Yeah, and as you saw when I dragged it, because the auto connect was on, it automatically tried to create those connections. But you can also do it with auto infer.
And you see it added all the constraints needed to fill in that other widget.
And you can see that the constraint that it created was not exactly the same as the auto-connection one. And that's actually because auto-connect only look at the elements that are close to you. So that's why it shows you those guidelines. And those guidelines, if you drop the widget at this moment, will create the constraints where the guidelines originate from. The auto-inference, on the other hand, look at the big picture.
Yeah, so it might pick things from, based on alignments, the probabilities are fairly complicated, and in the future we would try to do like more advanced algorithms in there. Okay.
But and I want to repeat what John said earlier, and it's very important. The auto-inference is not going to move things around. It will actually very hard try to keep the widget where you put them. So that means that if you're not happy with the result, you can still go back and edit it. And it also tries to make the connection that makes sense. That might not be the connection you had in mind, but that's a connection that makes sense when you look at the entire system. It doesn't go crazy. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's why also it's important to have those manual capabilities to edit the constraints, because we see it more as a kind of a symbiotic relation between you and the tool. The tool will help you, might get you there like 90% of the way, save you a ton of time, and you can just focus on what's left.
And even if it doesn't work out, you can always undo.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So let's simply build something common like a row. So if I want to create a row like that, I can start with, and I can use the tools as well. If I just want to center, I can just do that. And if I look at the recycle view now, it appears here. But of course, it's taking all the space. So if I mark now the constraint layout to be wrap content, you can see there is a refresh, right? And you can see how it's just integrate like that into recycle view. And you can just continue and add more stuff, and that's it. You can easily build your rows. So it doesn't automatically have to work with the entire UI. You can use it, of course, for your main UI, but you can use it for something as simple as a row like that. It is just a normal view group. And you can see the result. Let me just show you quickly how you create a new layout file. So you can, in Studio Preview 2.2, let's see, demo. You just go here and type ConstraintLayout. And what that will do, it will create the file. It actually will automatically add, if that was not the case, the dependency to the support library that contains ConstraintLayout. And you can then build something. And you can still use the design mode. If you actually prefer the design mode, that still works fine. We just, in that case, show the different constraint as an overlay on top of the system. Or you can just switch to Blueprint. I tend to prefer Blueprint because it just makes things easier for me when I'm working on layout. But the design mode is really useful to show you how things look. So if you want to just build like a typical dialogue like that, you could have something up just like that. And let's say a couple of, let's actually use email, and just plain text here, up, and then you can see that up, the connection works here, up, like that, and that's it. And without doing anything else, I got my dialog. And you can see it resize, up, if the repaint want to repaint. No, it doesn't want to repaint. Yep. Up, sorry.
You might want to infer.
Yeah. So, and you can still go back, kill all the constraints, do the inference, and you can see that the inference does a pretty good job as well. And you can note here that we constrain on the baseline, for instance. And I think that's about it for the demo. So we can go back to the slides.
Yeah. Go ahead. Talk about this stuff.
All right, so just to summarize a little bit what we showed you. So there is a new layout. It's called ConstraintLayout. It's a small unbundled library. It's about 100 kilobytes. Because it's unbundled, we think we'll be able to move fast and add new features. It's really built on top of a flexible base. And what's good for us is that we can control how fast we can move on the development and to make sure that the performances will sustain. It's compatible with mostly everything out there, and it's in active development. I want to emphasize this point. We just released it this week. It's coming just as an alpha preview. We definitely encourage you to check it out. Check the UI builder. And there's certainly some bugs. We'll fix them. But the reason we actually announced it at I/O was because we think it's ready enough to gather some feedback. And that's really something we are keen on. We want to hear from you. Our job is to make your life easier. On the UI builder, as you saw, the UI builder is kind of live, try to automatically react to your actions, to help you, to give you some guidance. And you can use the inference to create connections to really save you time. But you still have the manual edition. You can still go back and just edit things. And same as the constraint layout itself, it's in active development. It's the same team that works on both, which is why they are really well integrated together. So all of that I said for the constraint layout also applies definitely for the UI builder. And by the way, on Android Studio 2.2 preview, there is this new UI builder for constraint layout, but there is also a new UI builder for the other layout that you already use in your applications. And if you use the UI builder that was there in previous version of Studio, that new UI builder is definitely a step up. And again, for it as well, it will get better over time. All right, let me talk briefly about what we have in mind for the next versions. So if you remember the slide from earlier about the solver and the equation and the constraints, clearly, we are going to focus, and probably in the short term, that's mostly what we'll be working on, improving the performance. We have a ton of optimization that we haven't, obvious ones that we haven't yet done. So we really want to focus on that. For the equation themselves that we generate from the constraint, we have some interesting ideas on how to automatically take them and simplify them and optimize them. But for the constraint, there is a couple of things that we can do, and actually we could have demoed it. But in addition to those basic constraints that we demonstrated, we have the concept of helpers. And one of the helpers that we have in the preview actually is a guideline object. So you can create a guideline, think a Photoshop guideline, something like that, something that your designer probably work with. And you can just set a guideline, make it relative to one side or the other, or percentage of the dimension of the container, and simply constrain your widget to that guideline. The interesting thing, though, is that this guideline is not a new layout. This is just an object that we use to generate the right equations. And we have a ton of ideas of other type of virtual object like that will help you create more advanced layouts. Another thing that did not make the cut for I/O, but that we know is important, is that all we've talked so far and that we demoed lets you create constraints, position constraints, from one to one. Of course, it can be from one widget to many widgets for the two axes, but it's going to be from one widget to something else. And often, you want to actually consider position in terms of grouping. You want to say, yeah, sure, but I want this group of stuff to be vertically positioned. And we have a concept of virtual containers. And similarly to the guidelines, those things don't have to end up in the view hierarchy. So once we create them, they will actually appear in the XML as normal tags, so you'll see them. But when we inflate the XML, we can then drop them on the floor and simply use them to generate the right equations. So you'll still have the power of using groups without the implication in terms of the view hierarchy. You can think of this whole system as a way of decoupling the layout from the view hierarchy. And the shallower the view hierarchy, the better in terms of performances. But there are also other things. One particular thing that I'm really keen on exploring is if you have a very shallow view hierarchy, that should make your life a ton easier dealing with animations. I think if you try to do animation with very deep nested hierarchies, it can be very annoying because something that is really deep down in the hierarchy, you want it to maybe move somewhere else, and it's very difficult to do right now. But if you actually do not have an actual view hierarchy and everything is kind of flat, it's much nicer.
Yeah.
And of course, for the inference and tooling, we have some interesting ideas on how to let you import assets into Android Studio. And the concept is simply, we want to give you a step up. Don't start from scratch. If your designer gives you something, maybe there is something in what he gives you or she gives you that we can use. And finally, and John might have something to say about that.
Yeah. So the inference and tools are a combination that we see a lot of future of making your life very easy. So one of the things we want to do is back the probability by machine learning. So look at what layouts are out there, what are all the Google layouts that they've created, and see how they are working, and try to learn from them. Tools to help you more easily beautify and organize and arrange your widgets on the screen, more dynamics associated with when I put things on the screen, it'll automatically infer containers and virtual containers and guidelines and things like that as well. So there's a lot of room to grow in that area as well. Okay.
All right, thank you for your attendance. Check out the code lab. There's a great code lab that lets you walk you through the first steps in using constraint layout. Download the preview. Beyond the constraint layout and the new UI builder, there's a ton of things, as you saw in the previous sessions about Studio. File bugs, you can use the Tool Studio tag. And we can take some Q&A now, and there are some mics that you can name up to if you want.
OK.
Thank you.